Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back to one of the darkest, most miserable years in recorded history, 936 AD. No electricity. No medicine. No TikTok. Just you, the mud, and a suspiciously aggressive goose. You're going to wake up in a thatch-roofed hovel where the wind whistles through every wall, the fire's gone out, and your only pillow is a sack of barley husks, if you're lucky. The worst part? It's not even the plague. It's not even war. It's everything at once. Famine, superstition, climate chaos, and feudal politics so backwards they make office meetings look efficient. Oh, and did I mention your odds of survival hover somewhere between grim and you're already dead and no one's told you yet? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the sound of coughing. Not your own, though give it a few hours, but the hacking, rasping chorus of everyone else crammed into this windowless peasant hut with you. The air is thick with smoke from last night's dung fire. Someone nearby has wet themselves. Again. It's 936. Europe is starving. The sun's been shy for a couple of years now. Historians still argue whether it was because of volcanic eruptions or just an especially grim patch of the Dark Age's Little Ice Age. Either way, the crops failed. Then failed again. And now, here you are, lying beside 3 other people on a bed made of straw, rat droppings, and shattered dreams. You sit up and immediately whack your head on a roof beam. The splinters add some spice to your morning. A child across the room is gnawing on a shoe. Not out of playfulness, he's genuinely trying to soften it for soup. Outside, the air is gray. It's always gray. The village is little more than a scatter of thatched roofs, a sad church, and some overly enthusiastic chickens. Mud coats everything. People track it indoors, dogs roll in it, and sometimes you wonder if you're just made of mud now. Honestly, it's easier that way. You step outside and your breath fogs in the cold morning air. Your feet squish into something that might be manure or might be breakfast. You don't care anymore. The well water is half frozen and probably full of worms, but you drink anyway. Your stomach is a slow, aching pit. Everyone's hungry. Last year's harvest was a joke, and this year's was more like a cosmic prank. Your entire diet has devolved into root vegetables, moldy rye, and the occasional boiled tree bark. Someone once swore nettles were surprisingly nutritious, which is the medieval way of saying, this won't kill you immediately. There's no coffee. No tea. Just a weak barley mash so bland it might as well be regret in liquid form. As you trudge past the hovels, someone waves you down. It's Gilda, your neighbor, who might be 30 or 70. It's hard to tell when everyone's teeth fell out before puberty. She asks if your roof is leaking. You laugh. Everything leaks. Even the sky. Gilda mutters about how the sun hasn't looked right since St. Ealdred's bones were moved. You nod, because arguing logic with a woman who still believes sneezes are demonic is a bad way to start your day. And yet, she's not wrong. The weather's gone weird. Winters are longer, wetter. Summers never quite heat up. Historians think a series of volcanic eruptions in the early 930s may have thrown enough ash into the atmosphere to create a cooling effect across Europe. But to you, that just means one thing: no bread. The village priest says it's God's punishment. You suspect it might be the rats. You spend your morning doing what everyone does in 936, trying to not die. That means collecting firewood, which is increasingly scarce, patching up the walls with old reeds, and seeing if anything in the root cellar hasn't turned into a sentient, moldy blob. It's a full-time job staying alive in a world this actively hostile. There's talk of eating the last of the oxen. The village's only ox. That would mean no plowing next spring. But also, you wouldn't have to worry about spring if you're already dead from starvation by Lent. You're interrupted by a loud bell from the church, a handbell, really, because this village can't afford anything fancy. That means someone's died. Again. The dead don't stay buried for long. The ground's frozen solid. The graveyard is a patchy mess of shallow pits and crude markers, some of which have already collapsed into themselves like the social contract. You attend the funeral because, honestly, it's an event. The priest mumbles Latin. No one understands him, including the priest. A few villagers chant, not out of reverence but to keep their lips from freezing shut. Afterward, people linger, gossiping in hushed tones. Apparently, someone spotted a wolf near the edge of the woods. That's not unusual, but people are getting twitchy. Last week, a woman claimed to see the Virgin Mary in a turnip. She was mostly ignored, except by one man who ate the turnip and now thinks he's immortal. On your way back, you spot a traveling beggar, hunched and filthy, leaning on a stick that might have once been a tree, or a person. He tells you tales of another village, 2 days away, where they're boiling belts for stew. He offers to sell you lice. You decline. By sundown, you're back in the hovel. The fire flickers weakly. You nibble on a piece of bark bread so tough you're not sure it wasn't roofing material last week. Then you curl up in your straw bed, shoulder to shoulder with 3 other bodies. Someone coughs directly into your ear. Again. As you drift off, stomach empty, lungs heavy, you try to remember if you've smiled in the last 6 days. Probably not. But hey, at least you haven't been burned as a heretic yet. Small wins. You wake before dawn, mostly because someone is vomiting near your feet and partly because you're starving. Again. Hunger is your constant companion in 936, like an annoying roommate who also happens to be a slow, creeping executioner. The cold has seeped into your bones overnight, and your limbs feel like they've been forged from damp firewood. You try to stretch, but your muscles ache from yesterday's wood-gathering marathon, and the straw mattress has left impressive patterns on your face. Your joints click audibly, which either means arthritis or that you've officially become a walking weather vane. You trudge outside, where the ground crunches beneath your feet, not snow, just frost on layers of frozen mud and, let's be honest, mostly manure. Your first goal of the day is the same as everyone else's: find something, anything, to eat. You start with the communal garden. It's not a garden in any idyllic sense, more of a haunted patch of dirt where carrots used to live. Someone's already raided the turnip patch. Again. You kneel beside a patch of something vaguely green and yank it up. It's a thistle. Not ideal. As you chew the thistle and wince at every stab to your gums, you recall yesterday's big culinary breakthrough, nettle stew. It's basically medieval kale soup, except if kale fought back. Your fingers are still itchy from picking it barehanded. You've learned the trick is boiling the leaves 3 times to leach out the sting and at least some of the bitterness. But the flavor still sits somewhere between wet sock and forest regret. Nearby, a neighbor is scraping moss off a tree. You join her. Moss is surprisingly versatile. It's not filling, exactly, but it provides just enough fibrous illusion to keep your stomach from screaming. Add a little lichen and maybe some boiled pine bark, and you've got what passes for porridge these days. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants could actually survive on foraged food alone in years like this. Some say it was impossible and famine wiped out entire villages. Others believe people just adapted with incredibly creative food substitutes, like roasted acorns, sun-dried nettles, and sawdust bread. Yes, sawdust. Because nothing says, bon appetit, like chewing on the walls of your house. You gather your meager finds and return home to prepare what's optimistically called breakfast. It involves boiling everything twice and then mashing it with a pestle made from an old ox knuckle. You add a splash of last week's barley water, which is just this side of going sour, but still drinkable if you plug your nose. As the stew simmers, the door creaks open and in stumbles Egan, your neighbor's son. He's about 12 and looks like a scarecrow that lost a fight with a windmill. He grins, revealing 2 remaining teeth, and offers you a handful of mushrooms. You hesitate. Mushrooms are a gamble. Half the village swears by them as food. The other half is buried because of them. You ask Egan where he got them. He shrugs and points toward the woods. The dark patch near the rotting log, he says proudly. Which, of course, is precisely the kind of place where the most poisonous mushrooms thrive. You take one, nibble a bit, and decide that hallucinating is probably preferable to starving. Fingers crossed. Mid-morning arrives, and the sun has made a rare appearance, weak and watery, like it's also given up. You take your bowl of sludge outside and sit on a log. A rooster eyes your food, possibly judging you. You eat slowly, chewing around the twigs. A traveling friar wanders into the village, mumbling prayers and offering blessings in exchange for crusts. He looks equally famished, his robe patched with scraps of linen and hope. He blesses your bowl, and then casually asks if you've heard the prophecy about Saint Columbanus and the end of days. You nod politely. In 936, there's a new apocalypse rumor every Tuesday. The friar says famine is a sign, and that a holy river somewhere has turned to blood. You ask where. He says, very far, then accepts a bite of moss bread and wanders off, mumbling about sinners and celestial punishments. You can't help but wonder. The weather has been strange. Even the elders admit they've never seen such poor crops. Some believe it's punishment for lax fasting. Others blame the Frankish king or the ghosts of pagan temples. One theory blames geese. You wish that one weren't a joke. Just before noon, a loud crack splits the air. A tree branch collapses under the weight of frozen dew, and everyone jumps. Old Matilda starts wailing about omens. Someone mentions witch signs. You roll your eyes, but deep down, part of you wonders too. In a world with no science and no food, everything starts to feel like a sign. You spend the afternoon digging. Not graves, thankfully, just trying to unearth last year's forgotten parsnips. The ground is stubborn, the soil frozen, but you strike gold, a single, shriveled root. It smells like victory. You hold it aloft like Excalibur. Your stomach rumbles ominously, like it knows what's coming and is already disappointed. As the sky darkens to its usual grim dusk, you head back to your hovel, prize in hand. A group of children is gathered around an old woman who's telling a story about a time when winters were mild, apples grew in abundance, and people smiled. The kids stare in disbelief. Apples? Smiles? Sounds fake. You boil the parsnip. It turns soft and slightly sweet, and for a few brief moments, as the warmth spreads through your fingers and steam curls around your cheeks, you feel almost cozy. Until someone farts. Loudly. And the illusion breaks. You lie down on the straw, stomach fullish, heart oddly content. You didn't die today. That counts as a win. You wake up to shouting. Not joyous shouting. 936 doesn't really do joy, but the guttural, barked orders of a man on horseback. You sit up, bits of straw clinging to your face, and shuffle to the doorway, blinking against the dull gray morning light. Outside, a small group of mounted men in rusted chainmail clank into the village like a walking scrapyard. At their center rides a broad-shouldered man with a tattered red cloak and a very punchable smirk. He doesn't introduce himself, because he doesn't have to. He's the Reeve, the local tax collector and representative of the feudal lord who owns this miserable patch of land. This man owns you, technically. But in fairness, so does everyone else. He announces that the annual obligations are due. The villagers groan in unison, a sound halfway between despair and constipation. The Reeve lists what he wants: grain, eggs, smoked fish, wool, and, wait for it, teeth. You heard that right. The Reeve wants teeth. Not yours, ideally, but any you can spare. Animal, human, doesn't matter. You quickly learn this is a grim little side hustle. Wealthier nobles pay for prosthetic tooth replacements, and what better source than the jawbones of starving peasants? You edge back toward your hovel and silently check your mouth. 6 good teeth left. You make a mental note to keep your mouth shut around the Reeve. The feudal system is simple, and by simple, we mean catastrophically unfair. You're what's called a serf, which is basically a medieval blend of tenant, slave, and walking wallet. You don't own your home. You don't own your land. You don't even own your own future. Everything you grow, build, or butcher belongs to the Lord, and he might let you keep some of it if he's feeling generous or mildly constipated. Historians still argue whether this kind of bondage was more like slavery or just extremely exploitative tenancy. Either way, you're not going anywhere without permission, and trying to leave is punishable by everything from public whipping to being tied to a cartwheel and spun until you puke theology. You head to the communal granary, a rickety structure that's mostly mouse poop and optimism, to see what your family can offer the Reeve. There's not much. A few sad handfuls of barley, a pouch of dried nettles, and one very confused chicken. Your neighbor, Tom, offers a bundle of reeds and a shoe. The Reeve sneers. Tom tries to explain the shoe is vintage Frankish. He gets a kick to the ribs for his troubles. Suddenly, the Reeve spots something in the crowd, little Egan, the mushroom kid. More specifically, Egan's father, who apparently missed last season's tax payment. A heated exchange follows. The Reeve demands Egan's goat. The man refuses, claiming it's the only milk source in the village. The Reeve leans down, smiles, and says, "Then milk your wife." A few seconds of stunned silence follow before all hell breaks loose. Egan's father lunges. The Reeve's guards tackle him, beat him into the mud, and announce he'll be fined 3 pigs he does not own. You step back. If anyone asks, you're just a passing beat farmer. The rest of the morning is tense. Villagers whisper in corners, bitter about the taxes, angry at the Reeve, terrified of what might happen next. Someone says we should complain to the bishop. Someone else laughs so hard they almost cough up a lung. By midday, the Reeve's men have taken their spoils and ridden off, kicking up mud and curses in equal measure. A few people cry. One man swears he'll revolt. Another suggests that, maybe, next time we offer teeth first to avoid beatings later. You suggest his teeth. He doesn't laugh. You spend the afternoon fixing the roof of your hovel, again. Every time the wind shifts, It sounds like the whole thing might take flight like some cursed hay zeppelin. You've gotten good at weaving reeds, though. It's oddly soothing, even as your fingers crack from cold and splinters. Later, you visit old Enwin, the village wise woman. She offers you a salve for your cracked hands, made from pig fat, yarrow, and what might be spider legs. She also reads your palm and tells you you'll live a long life, if you survive the next 3 weeks. You ask if she's serious. She just shrugs and feeds her one-eyed cat a beetle. As the sun dips low, which, frankly, is barely above the horizon even at noon these days, the village gathers near the church for prayers. Not because anyone's especially devout, but because it's one of the only places with a roof that mostly stays up. The priest drones in Latin. No one understands a word. Someone near the back starts humming a tune, then gets smacked. You light a tallow candle and whisper a prayer to Saint Cuthbert, mostly because his name is fun to say and you vaguely remember he was good with plagues. Afterward, people linger. Talk turns, as it often does, to what-ifs. What if we lived in a different village? What if the Lord was kinder? What if the sun came back and crops actually grew? One man says he's heard tales of a place where peasants only work 3 days a week. Everyone stares at him like he's just confessed to marrying a goat. You secretly hope it's true. Back at home, your family is huddled around the fire. You share your reed roofing stories, the Reeves tooth request, and a theory that maybe the world ended in 900 and this is just purgatory. Your grandmother nods sagely. Purgatory, she says, has fewer fleas. You fall asleep to the crackle of the fire and the distant sound of someone retching. Probably from the mushroom stew. You dream of giant, glowing teeth with tiny crowns on top, chasing the reeve through a muddy field. It's your best dream in weeks. You wake up sweating, which is alarming, because it's barely above freezing inside your hovel. It's not the good kind of sweat either, this is the fevered, skin-crawling sort that announces one thing: you're sick. You sit up slowly, head pounding like a blacksmith's anvil. Your limbs ache, your throat is raw, and your stomach is gurgling with ominous intent. You reach for your water gourd, someone else has used it. Possibly for their feet. You sip anyway. It's 936. Hygiene is a suggestion, not a practice. The rest of your household eyes you with suspicion. Illness means trouble. Not just because of the very real risk of death, but because everything can be interpreted as divine punishment. Or worse, witchcraft. You bundle yourself in the least moldy blanket you can find and shuffle outside for help. Enter medieval medicine, a thrilling mixture of superstition, leeches, and whatever herb someone hasn't already smoked for visions. You go to see Wolfston, the village healer. He's not technically a doctor, because those are for kings and rich bishops. He's more of a holy handyman who's read one Latin scroll and uses equal parts prayer and mud. You explain your symptoms: chills, fever, nausea. He nods wisely, sniffs your breath, grimacing, and declares that your black bile is out of balance. The cure? Bleeding, obviously. The medieval solution to every problem, from headaches to heartbreak. You try to object, but he already has the leech in hand. It's enormous. Possibly sentient. He plops it on your neck like he's adding a garnish to a roast chicken. You sit there, very still, while your blood slowly leaves your body and a goose honks mockingly in the distance. Historians still debate whether bloodletting did more harm than good. Some argue it at least reduced fever by volume loss. Others say it just sped up the dying process in a more theatrical way. Either way, you're now dizzy, sweaty, and several ounces lighter. Wolfston gives you a potion as a follow-up, a thick, bitter brew of horehound, vinegar, wormwood, and something he won't name. You ask what's in it. He shrugs and says, God's mercy. You drink it, immediately question all your life choices, and lie down on a hay mat that smells suspiciously like goat pee. The village priest hears you're sick and visits uninvited. He sprinkles holy water over your bedding, says a prayer in Latin, and suggests that your illness might be the result of unchaste thoughts about the neighbor's daughter. You point out that the neighbor's daughter is 60 and has one tooth. The priest glares. You cough in his direction. He leaves. Later, Gilda the midwife shows up. Not because she likes you, but because she's bored. She sits beside you and starts listing everyone she's ever seen die of similar symptoms. Her tone is conversational, even cheerful. You nod along, trying not to imagine yourself rotting in a shallow grave next to last year's pig skulls. She tells you about a man who once had the exact same symptoms, fever, chills, nausea, and survived by drinking his own urine. You make a mental note not to survive that way. She shrugs and leaves you with a compress of mashed onion and chicken fat. You're not sure if it's for your forehead or your soul. Afternoon fades into a foggy dusk. You drift in and out of sleep, sweating and shivering in turns. In one dream, a leech climbs onto your face and demands rent. In another, a saint rides in on a pig and offers you soup. It's unclear if either are metaphors or memories. Eventually, you wake to find someone has lit a candle beside your bed. The flame flickers in the drafty room, casting long shadows that dance like spirits on the wall. Your head is clearer, but your stomach is not. You lurch outside and vomit behind the chicken coop. The chickens don't even flinch. They've seen worse. In the distance, you hear bells. Not church bells, these are clunky, handmade things, strung up on wooden frames. A warning. Someone has died. Again. You stagger back inside. The other villagers avoid you now, which in a way is comforting. If they're keeping their distance, you're still alive enough to pose a threat. As night falls, you feel well enough to sit by the hearth and sip weak broth made from turnip peels and marrowless bones. It tastes like despair with a hint of ash. But it's warm, and your stomach keeps it down. Small victories. You overhear talk about St. Ethelburga's shrine a few villages away. People say she can cure anything. They also say she once turned a wolf into a lamb, which seems suspiciously metaphorical. Still, someone suggests a pilgrimage. You laugh, then cough for 30 seconds straight. Probably not this week. Someone else swears by garlic poultices. You try one. It burns. But hey, at least now you smell so pungent that not even the rats will bother you. By midnight, you lie in bed again, surprisingly not dead. The fever has broken. Your chest still aches, but the room no longer spins. You take this as a good sign. As you drift into sleep, a strange comfort settles over you. You've lived through another brush with death. You've survived bleeding, potions, and unsolicited saint opinions. You're starting to understand why medieval people had such intense faith. It's either divine intervention or dumb luck that gets you through the night. Or maybe it's just the leech. That smug little blood sponge is still stuck to your ankle. You wake up still alive, which feels like a minor miracle. The fire has gone out, your back hurts, and your breath fogs in the cold air, but you're vertical, breathing, and currently not leaking blood. A win. Outside, the village is already stirring. Chickens squawk, someone is yelling about missing turnips, and the morning fog rolls low over the fields like a damp wool blanket. You stretch, then immediately regret it. Your muscles feel like they've been trampled by a donkey. It's probably from yesterday's vomit-adjacent yoga. You shuffle toward the center of the village when you hear it, low murmurs, gathering tension, the occasional phrase like Northmen and cursed ships. You freeze. Vikings? You thought they were gone. And they mostly are, mostly. By the 930s, Viking raids have tapered off across much of Western Europe. After decades of terrorizing coastal towns, many Norse raiders have settled down, converted to Christianity, and gotten into the exciting world of land management. Some even marry into local nobility. It's a classic enemies-to-in-laws arc. But not all of them. A trader passing through claims that a band of Norsemen was spotted upriver, lurking in the fog. He says their sails are black, their ships narrow and fast. You ask how he knows this. He leans close and whispers, the air smelled of iron and fish oil. Honestly, it always smells like that around here, but no one interrupts him. The older villagers grow quiet. You hear murmurs of Bjorn's Hill, long knives, and the burning granary. You ask someone about it. He looks around, lowers his voice, and tells you that 20 years ago, raiders came through. Killed the miller, stole the cattle, painted rude runes on the church door. One woman claimed they left behind a half-buried treasure under the ash tree. Another swears she had a child with one. That child? He's the village blacksmith. Big hands. Terrible at math. Suspiciously blonde. You spend the rest of the morning helping to reinforce the village fence, a term used very generously here. It's mostly crooked wooden stakes and anxiety. Some suggest lighting fires on the hills as warning beacons. Others argue that fire might attract the Norse instead. It's a real lose-lose situation. As you work, a toothless elder named Brego sidles up to you. He's wearing a fur cape and no pants, which you decide not to question. He tells you, unprompted, about the time he met a Viking who could split a man in half with one swing. You ask what happened to that Viking. Brego grins. Married my cousin. Died of dysentery. By midday, the mood has shifted from panic to grim acceptance. You help hide a few supplies in the root cellar and move the children indoors. The priest begins chanting extra prayers. He's also moved all the holy relics into his own house, for safekeeping, including the golden candlestick he never lets anyone touch. Historians still argue whether Viking raids in the 10th century were truly a widespread threat at this point or mostly isolated incidents used by villagers as excuses for bad behavior and burned toast. The fear, however, feels real. And that's enough. Later, a new face appears in the village. A grizzled, one-eyed traveler named Arnulf. He wears a patchwork cloak and smells like pine, blood, and smoked trout. He says he fought against Norse raiders in the north, that they've become more desperate, more scattered, less gods, more ghosts. He shows you his axe. It's not a fancy weapon. It's not even that sharp. But it has a rune carved into the handle, Algais, the protection symbol. He offers to teach you how to hold it properly, and you agree. Not because you think it'll help, but because you feel like you should do something other than stew in fear. He tells you about shield formations, about how the Norse sing before battle, and how they sometimes eat hallucinogenic mushrooms to work themselves into a frenzy. You blink. Egan has those. He offered you some last week. You make a note not to eat those before any future raiding parties. The training doesn't last long, your arms tire quickly, and the axe feels like swinging a church bench, but something about the rhythm of it is strangely calming. You thank Arnulf. He nods, then eats a raw onion like it's an apple. That evening, the villagers gather again. The priest reads from a Latin text none of you understand, and someone plays a crude harp made of sheep gut and driftwood. The music is thin, haunting, and kind of beautiful. No raid comes that night. But the fear lingers. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to every crack and groan of the wooden frame. Every gust of wind sounds like footfalls. Every shadow feels longer than it should. Eventually, your eyes grow heavy. Your thoughts wander. You imagine a sleek longship gliding across a river, its crew pale and grim-eyed, blades gleaming in the moonlight. And you wonder, if they did come, would you fight? Or just offer them a bowl of nettle stew and hope they're gluten-free? You wait before dawn, not because you're noble or disciplined, but because a rooster directly outside your hut has declared war on sleep. You fling a boot in its general direction. You miss. The rooster, undeterred, continues his operatic crowing, as if he's auditioning for a poultry-themed tragedy. The village is quiet, not from peace but from tension. Everyone's holding their breath. No black sails were spotted yesterday, but the unease hasn't lifted. People speak in hushed tones, like the very air might carry rumors to the river. You help patch a leaky roof using straw, mud, and good intentions. It's thankless work, but it keeps your mind off things. You try not to imagine a Norse axe slamming through the thatch mid-snore. By mid-morning, Arnulf the One-Eyed Wanderer is teaching a group of children how to make slingshots from sheep gut and bent sticks. His idea of childcare is, weaponize them early. The priest is appalled, but nobody listens to the priest anymore. He recently tried to sell indulgences in exchange for turnips. You overhear an argument about whether the Vikings are real or just a recurring peasant hallucination caused by moldy bread and unresolved trauma. One man insists they're just a story for scaring children. Another quietly mentions the burnt remains of his uncle's abbey. To lighten the mood, the village organizes a feast. It's a small, nervous, defiant kind of feast. Bread, boiled roots, and a suspiciously chewy stew. The cook swears it's venison, but it tastes more like vague woodland creature. They even break out a jug of honey wine that's been fermenting under someone's bed since the last wedding. It tastes like wet bark and makes your cheeks go numb. You have 2 cups. Later, a bard appears. Where he came from, no one knows. He's young, with tangled hair and a crooked smile, carrying a lute that looks like it survived a house fire. He sings songs of brave kings, noble knights, and one unusually seductive goose. The last one gets the most applause. You ask him about Vikings. He leans in dramatically and says, they wear iron, paint their teeth black, and pray to gods who eat lightning and drink blood. You ask if he's ever seen one. He pauses. No, but my uncle's goat once saw one from a distance. Classic bard. After the music, you wander toward the river. It's calm, too calm. Mist hugs the surface like a secret. You try to spot movement, ripples, sails, oars, but there's nothing. Just reeds swaying in the breeze and the distant sound of a frog with poor timing. Suddenly, a scream. You sprint back to the village, but it's just old Matilda yelling at a goose who stole her bread. The goose wins the encounter. That night, the village holds a vote, sort of. It's mostly shouting. Some want to flee inland, others want to set a trap, and a few advocate for summoning a demon to fight on your behalf. They are overruled. Arnulf suggests posting a lookout on the hill with a horn to warn of approaching ships. You are, unfortunately, chosen. You've got good eyes, someone says. They're wrong. Your vision is passable on a good day. You climb the hill. It's steep, muddy, and absolutely not designed for comfort. There's a tree stump and a horn made from a hollowed-out ox. You sit and wait. Hours pass. The stars come out. You shiver under your cloak. The darkness is total. The wind whistles. You start naming stars out of boredom. That's Stabby, that one's fish nose, over there is the Goat King. At one point, you hear rustling in the bushes. You raise the horn and prepare to alert the village, but it's just a deer. The deer stares at you like you're the weird one. It snorts and trots away. Eventually, your eyes droop. You lean against the stump and close them for just a moment. When you wake, the sun is rising, and the river is still empty. Another false alarm. But still, the fear remains. You can feel it beneath your skin like splinters. You trudge back to the village, exhausted. Everyone looks at you like you're a war hero. You feel more like a damp broom. No one died. No one was taken. That's a victory in these times. And yet, in the corner of your vision, behind the reeds and fog and reeds again, maybe, just maybe, you thought you saw the outline of a ship. But that could have just been a log. Could have been. You wake stiff, wrapped in your cloak like a sad meat pastry. Your neck hurts. Your back hurts. Even your dreams hurt. But the village is still standing, the river is still quiet, and no one's been burned or pillaged. So, you count that as a win. As you stagger toward the well for a splash of something resembling cleanliness, a child runs past, shrieking with laughter. He's covered in ash and holding a very real knife. You make a mental note to stay on that child's good side. The well water is icy, a slap from the gods. You splash it on your face and try to scrub away the grime, though your skin now permanently smells of smoke, soup, and existential anxiety. At breakfast, the communal pot is boiling. Inside, turnips, leeks, and a single, proud onion that everyone insists is magical. It wards off Vikings, claims Matilda. No one wants to sack a village that smells like soup farts. The priest disagrees. He says only prayer can save you. Then he promptly drops a piece of hard bread into the fire and yells, "Damned be thy flames," before storming off. He's unraveling. The morning is spent reinforcing the palisade. It's not a real wall, just sharpened sticks held together by string, hope, and sheer pettiness. Arnulf supervises, occasionally shouting things like, "Put your back into it," and, "That stick looks cowardly." You hammer in pegs, tie knots, and smear tar on the weaker joints. The tar smells like death and sticks to your soul. A boy asks, "If the Vikings come, will this stop them?" You look at the wobbling fence. You look at the boy. You lie, "Yes." Around midday, a messenger arrives on a mule. He's breathless, covered in sweat, and clutching a scroll like it's a sacred relic. He announces that a Viking raiding party was seen 2 days upriver, burning a monastery and stealing an entire bell. "Why a bell?" someone asks. "Because they can," the messenger shrugs. Panic brews. People argue about what to do next. Should you flee, fight, or try to bribe them with livestock and strong drink? One man suggests offering his mother-in-law. He's met with nods of grim approval. Eventually, a council is formed. It includes the priest, Arnulf, Matilda, and a man who once saw a Viking from a hill and hasn't stopped talking about it since. They sit in a circle, arguing loudly while chickens walk through the middle. You're not on the council. You're tasked with organizing supplies, food, water, weapons, and anything remotely sharp. A rusty scythe, a broken pitchfork, and a shovel with one side chewed off by rats. Glorious. You also gather stones. You're not sure why. Someone says it's for throwing. Someone else says it's symbolic. Either way, you now have a very heavy bag of rocks and a sense of creeping dread. By late afternoon, the wind changes. You smell salt. Hear distant gulls. There's no ocean nearby. Just the river, wide and silent. You squint toward the horizon. For a moment, you think you see a glint of metal, just a flash, like sunlight on a blade. But then it's gone. You don't tell anyone. No need to start a panic over a trick of the light. As evening falls, the village prepares for night. Fires are lit. Guards are posted. Someone ties bells to the fence in case it's breached. They jingle like a festive apocalypse. You volunteer for night watch again. Mostly because you can't sleep. Not really. Not when your dreams are full of screaming. This time you're not alone. A girl named Ellsworth joins you. She's maybe 15, with wild hair and about taller than she is. She doesn't say much, just watches the river with her eyes narrowed like a hawk's. After an hour, she finally speaks. My father died at the abbey they burned. You nod. Quiet. There's nothing you can say. They hanged him from the bell rope. Rang it with his body. You try to swallow, but your throat is dry. I'm going to kill one, she says, calm as dusk. Maybe two. You don't doubt her. The rest of the night is slow. Stars flicker. The river whispers. Once, you think you hear oars cutting water, but when you strain to listen, it's gone. Ellsworth says nothing, but she knocks an arrow. Just in case. You make it until dawn. Barely. When the sun rises, the river is still just water. The trees are still just trees. But your hands are trembling. This is survival, you realize. Not glorious battles or stirring speeches. Just waiting. Watching. Breathing. And hoping they don't come tomorrow. Another morning arrives, not with birdsong or peace, but with screaming. Real screaming this time. Not children playing. Not some drunk shouting at a goat. No, this is terror, high-pitched and guttural. You bolt upright and grab your weapon, which is, regrettably, still a slightly bent hoe. The village is in chaos. Smoke rises near the granary. People run, shouting incoherent warnings. A man stumbles past with a bleeding ear and no pants. Matilda is shrieking for someone to get water, though from where is unclear. You charge toward the noise, heart hammering. And then you see it, not a Viking ship, not a raiding horde. No, it's worse. It's horses. Local bandits, probably. They've come to test your defenses now that rumors of raiders have everyone on edge. Opportunists. Scum. They gallop in with improvised armor and terrible dental hygiene, brandishing clubs and rusty swords. One is wearing a helmet that looks like a cooking pot. You and the others form a shaky line behind the fence. Arnulf screams, "Hold fast," and waves a spear. The priest is praying so hard he's foaming. Ellsworth already has an arrow loosed before you even take aim with your rock. Yes. You throw a rock. It hits a bandit square in the face. He screams, drops his club, and topples off his horse. You feel proud for about 2 seconds before another rider smashes through the fence. Panic erupts. Screaming. Smoke. Shouting. The world becomes sound and fear and flailing limbs. You swing the hoe. It connects with someone's knee. You're not sure whose, but they fall and you keep moving. Ellsworth is a blur of arrows. Arnulf tackles a man twice his size and bites his ear. It is complete madness. But, miraculously, it works. The bandits weren't expecting resistance. When one of their own falls into the pig pen and is mauled by an extremely angry sow named Bertha, they decide it's not worth it. They retreat. Fast. One drops his sword. Another gets tangled in laundry and screams, witchcraft, before fleeing. And then it's over. The village stands, scorched and bruised, but intact. People cheer. Someone weeps with relief. Matilda declares that the magical onion definitely helped. You sink to the ground, chest heaving. You've never felt so exhausted. Or so alive. Later, you walk the village, helping assess the damage. The fence is wrecked. The granary scorched. The pigs are traumatized. One won't stop shrieking. Might be Bertha. You find Ellsworth sitting on a barrel, inspecting a cut on her arm. You all right? You ask. She nods. I got one. You sit beside her. And your arm? It's just blood, she shrugs. Better out than in. You laugh, a brittle, stunned kind of laugh. Arnulf limps past, proudly dragging a stolen bandit saddle. War prize, he shouts. Also, I think I dislocated my dignity. The village throws together a feast that night, because what else can you do after surviving a near massacre? You eat roasted roots, stale bread, and something Matilda swears is pigeon stew. No one asks how she caught the pigeon. The priest says a blessing. Everyone listens. Even the children. You don't know if it's faith or fear or just the need to believe something bigger than your hoe saved you today. Afterward, there's dancing. Bad dancing. Someone plays a lute with 3 strings. A boy juggles potatoes. You sway with a cup of watery ale in hand, too tired to feel awkward. As the fire dies down, you find yourself standing by the broken fence, staring into the night. No ships. No oars. Just wind and water. Still, your skin prickles. Your stomach twists. Because if bandits came today, how far behind can the real danger be? Ellsworth joins you. They'll come soon, won't they? She asks. You nod. She sighs. Good. I'm tired of waiting. You don't sleep much that night. Who could? Because survival isn't just about food and fences and magical onions. It's about knowing that tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Morning fog hangs over the village like a damp shroud, muffling sound, hiding shapes. Everything looks softer, dreamlike, as if yesterday hadn't happened. But it did. You wake with sore muscles, a bruised hip, and the distinct realization that part of your cloak smells like pig urine. Likely Bertha's way of thanking you. There's no time for moping. The fence must be repaired. The pigs need feeding. And your hoe, once a humble farming tool, now your weapon of choice, needs straightening. Again. As you limp toward the workshop, you pass by Ellsworth sharpening her arrows. She nods without looking. You nod back. That's how warriors communicate, apparently, wordless acknowledgement and mutual pain. Today feels different, though. The villagers are quieter. Not broken, just more aware. They work faster, glancing over shoulders, listening too hard to birdsong, to the wind, to the distant, rhythmic thump of their own racing hearts. You hammer your hoe on the anvil, trying to reforge it into something more intimidating. The blacksmith, whose entire training consists of once watching a horse kick a cartwheel straight, offers advice. Hit it harder, he says, and then adds, no, not like that. Eventually, you produce something that is less a hoe and more a jagged, vaguely terrifying lump of iron attached to a stick. Perfect. You call it scratcher. It feels right. That afternoon, a scout returns from the hills. He's breathless, pale, and swearing loudly. They're coming, he gasps. Ships. Big ones. Dragon heads on the prows. Everyone goes silent. Vikings. The word falls like a stone in your gut. Even Bertha grunts and waddles into her hut. Ellsworth begins preparing without a word. Arnulf takes a shot of mead and mutters, guess it's war again, then. You gather in the village square. The priest tries to offer encouragement, but accidentally quotes a funeral prayer. No one corrects him. Plans are made. Sort of. The idea is simple, don't die. A few trenches. A few traps. A single catapult someone calls the Persuader, which is actually just a log on a pivot. Children are moved to the caves. Matilda guards the food with a knife she claims belonged to Saint Margaret. It looks suspiciously like a butter spreader. You spend the evening reinforcing your section of the fence, heart heavy, mind racing. War is no longer a legend from the old men. It is footsteps on the horizon. It is sails on the sea. That night, Ellsworth joins you again at the edge of the field. She holds a new bow. You hold Scratcher. She breaks the silence. Scared? You nod. Me too, she says. You both stand there, watching the mist roll back in, cloaking the world in gray. In the distance, drums begin. Low. Rhythmic. Like thunder. Ellsworth doesn't flinch. Neither do you. Because something has changed. You are no longer just a peasant, a gatherer of roots, a flinger of rocks. You are someone who stood when others might have run. Who stayed when it would have been easier to disappear into the woods. Tomorrow, you will face warriors bred for blood. Men with axes and songs about skulls. But tonight, you're here. Together. Awake. And alive. You fall asleep in your hut with Scratcher beside you. The fire crackles softly. Rain begins to fall. And somewhere far off, ships slice the sea in half like knives through cream. You wake before dawn. Not because of duty. Not because of discipline. But because of the silence. Too quiet. The birds, usually chattering and bickering in the thatch, are gone. The pigs are still. Even the wind, that ever-present reminder that you live somewhere perpetually soggy, seems to be holding its breath. You sit up, listening. Then you hear it, a soft rhythmic thudding. Barely audible. Like someone drumming on the earth with a giant's fingertip. The drums have returned. You dress quickly, layered tunic, patched leggings, and a hood that smells vaguely of wet moss. You tie on your boots, ignoring the hole in the sole, grab Scratcher, your misshapen iron friend, and step outside. A thin mist hangs across the fields. Your breath fogs the air. Ellsworth is already there, bow slung across her back, hair braided tightly. She looks over and says nothing. Just nods once. That's all it takes. You make your way to the village square where the others have gathered. Someone has lit a large fire. Not for warmth. For morale. The flames crackle and spit, sparks rising into the still dark sky. The light flickers over faces, tired, pale, frightened, determined. Arnulf, clad in a patchwork of leather, chain, and fur, stands on a barrel and addresses the crowd. They'll likely land by noon, he begins, voice gruff. 3 ships. Maybe more. They'll come fast and hard. They always do. No one interrupts. He pauses, then adds, we hold the line. We give them nothing. Not our homes, not our children, not our pigs. Bertha, somehow, snorts right on cue. A few chuckles ripple through the group. Arnulf cracks a small grin. Good. Laughter means we're not dead yet. You are given your task, hold the northern fence, the most likely point of entry. You and 7 others. None of you warriors. One of you, Jitha, was once the village's best basket weaver. She now carries a spear that looks older than her grandfather. You spend the morning fortifying. The fence is reinforced with logs, sharpened stakes, and buckets of unpleasant things, manure, sour milk, and something the brewer won't identify, that you plan to fling at invaders. Scratcher is sharpened. Not well, but enough to cause regret. Ellsworth climbs a nearby tree for a better view, her bow ready, eyes scanning the horizon. Then you hear them. Voices. Shouting. A distant horn, deep and brassy, echoing across the hills. The Vikings have landed. And they are not subtle about it. You see them soon after, tall figures with round shields, painted faces, and axes gleaming under the midday sun. They march with a strange grace, like they know exactly what they're doing. Because they do. You swallow hard. Your mouth is dry. Every part of your body screams that this is a bad idea. But you stay. They reach the edge of the field and pause. Their leader steps forward, a giant of a man with blonde braids, a beard down to his chest, and a cloak made from what appears to be wolf pelts. He raises a hand. The warriors halt. Then, in surprisingly good old English, he shouts. Surrender your food, your gold, and your livestock, and we'll leave your bones in peace. Arnulf shouts back, we have no gold, barely any food, and the livestock bites. Bertha grunts. The Viking laughs, a deep, genuine belly laugh. Then his face goes cold. So be it. He signals. The charge begins. They move fast, too fast. Shields up, axes raised, roaring like thunder. You grip Scratcher, heart hammering. And then. Impact. The first Viking to reach you is met with a thrown bucket of something pungent. He slips, crashes into a post, and goes down. You jab with Scratcher, catch another on the knee. He howls. Arrows rain down from the trees. Ellsworth's doing. One finds a neck. Another lodges in a shield. Chaos explodes. You duck, swing, jab, stumble, swing again. There's screaming, yours, theirs, everyone's. Jitha thrusts her ancient spear into a Viking's gut with surprising strength. someone behind you is yelling your name. You turn, barely in time to raise your weapon as an axe arcs toward you. It hits your shoulder. Pain explodes. You scream and fall back, vision swimming. The Viking steps over you, grinning. Then Ellsworth's arrow finds his eye. He collapses next to you. She appears moments later, pulling you behind the fence, barking orders. Stay with me. You grit your teeth, nod. Around you, the fight continues. The villagers, somehow, hold. They fight like cornered animals, desperate, fierce, wild. Then, like a wave breaking, the Vikings retreat. Back across the field, dragging their wounded. Arnulf pants, covered in blood that's not entirely his. We did it, he gasps. For now. Everyone collapses where they stand. You lie in the mud, arm throbbing, chest heaving. Ellsworth kneels beside you, pressing something against your shoulder. You'll live, she says. Barely. You laugh. It hurts. Children peek from the caves. The priest stumbles out and starts reciting the wrong psalm again. But it's okay. You won. You. A peasant with a misshapen hoe. You spend the night wrapped in bandages and blankets. Every movement aches. But your heart is light. Not because the danger is over, it isn't. But because you faced it. When dawn rises, pink and gold over the village, you see the fields again. Torn. Bloodied. But still there. The pigs grunt. The birds return. The wind resumes its song. Ellsworth brings you a chunk of bread. You were almost heroic, she teases. You take it. Almost. She shrugs. You screamed a lot. Fair enough. You close your eyes. Sleep comes quickly. Because for the first time in days, you know something for certain. You are not just surviving anymore. You are living. You sit by the fire, clutching a hunk of stale bread with both hands like it's a bar of gold. And, well, in this part of 936, it might as well be. After a journey plagued with mud, parasites, and a charming scent of unwashed humanity, you've finally made it to a place where people still have roofs, crops, and possibly, if the stars align, a functional sense of humor. You're in the Slavic frontier now. Not quite east, not quite west. A land that's both fiercely independent and constantly being fought over. The river near the village trickles by lazily, a thin ribbon of peace in a region that rarely sees any. You were taken in by a family who clearly thought you were either a lost foreigner, a blessing from the saints, or mildly insane. Possibly all three. The air here smells of fermented rye and smoke. The forest hums with the sound of hidden things, wolves, maybe. Spirits, if you ask the elders. And it turns out, you did ask, by accident, after pointing to a twisted birch tree and joking that it looked cursed. Cue immediate silence, 3 crossed fingers, and a muttered incantation involving garlic and a surprisingly aggressive use of spit. Here, belief is not some dusty relic, it's a daily lifeline. Every crooked stone, every shadow in the woods, every illness or bountiful harvest, it all comes back to forces most modern minds would consider charming folklore. But you, stranded and shoeless in 936, are starting to think there might be something to it. After all, you've made it this far, and that alone feels borderline supernatural. Your hosts explain the rules of this land as best they can, mostly with gestures and increasingly loud repetition, as if shouting, Domovoy, over and over will somehow give you cultural context. You nod, smile, and pretend you totally understand that there's a house spirit living behind the stove who must be kept warm and fed. Sure. Why not? It's less weird than leech therapy. Life here is, in a word, raw. Not raw like a trendy salad bar. Raw like a place where people still think bathing is suspicious and might remove your protective oils. Your body protests with every step, your back stiff from sleeping on straw, your skin itchy from what you're fairly certain is flea bite roulette. But your senses are alive in a way they've never been. You've never heard wind like this, whipping through tall pine like a choir of whispers. You've never tasted honey like this, pulled straight from a log hive, thick and musky with wildflowers. In town, if you can call it that, men and women gather for markets that are more barter than business. You swap a carved bone comb for a chunk of salt-cured meat. A child hands you a beet with dirt still clinging to it, like a gift from the earth itself. It's beautiful, in a scratchy-throated, slightly paranoid way. Here comes your quirky tidbit. In some Slavic traditions of the time, if someone in the household sneezed, everyone had to say, "May you live," immediately, or else risk inviting illness or death. Given the amount of smoke and mildew clinging to everything, this means dinner is often interrupted by a choir of panicked blessings. You sleep each night in a low-beamed longhouse, tucked under animal pelts that reek of survival. Sometimes, in the quiet, you think about time, how much of it you've crossed, how little the people here know about the world beyond the next hill. One evening, you try explaining what airplanes are to a boy sharpening sticks. He listens politely, then asks if you're a dream sent by the forest. You start to answer, but decide to nod instead. Yes. Let's go with that. One of the older villagers tells you a tale about the bones buried beneath the river bend, where strange lights hover on foggy nights. You ask if it's a ghost story. He replies, "What's a ghost?" and proceeds to describe something much worse, a half-forgotten warrior cursed to remain between worlds, gnawing at the roots of time. You don't sleep well that night. Your duties now include helping to grind grain, hauling wood, and staying out of the way during pig slaughter. The latter earns you a pass. You gagged so hard the village healer gave you bitter herb tea and told you to go sit with the goats until your delicate spirit returned. Still, there's something undeniably peaceful about this life. The rhythm is slow, predictable in a way modernity rarely allows. The biggest news of the week might be a neighbor's cow giving birth, or a firefly swarm that glows like embers above the meadow. It's the kind of quiet that sinks into your bones. Makes you question whether we really progressed, or just got louder. And yet, historians still argue whether Slavic villages like this operated in tightly organized tribal federations, or if they were more like loose confederacies bound together by common threats and shared rituals. You've seen both. A fierce independence in each hut, but also a unity that comes from deep, old fear. Fear of being conquered. Fear of famine. Fear of being forgotten by the gods, or remembered too harshly. One night, around the communal fire, an elder woman with sharp eyes and a necklace of bird bones asks where you're truly from. You pause. Tell her the stars. She doesn't laugh. She nods, then gives you a blackened root to chew and mutters a prayer that tastes like dirt and old dreams. You sleep deeply that night, and for the first time in weeks, you don't wake up cold. In this strange liminal space, caught between superstition and survival, between old gods and new faiths, you begin to understand something that no textbook could teach. Time isn't a straight line. It's a loop of breath, a repetition of soil, fire, story, and fear. You're not supposed to be here, not really. But for now, in this quiet corner of 936, you are. And maybe, just maybe, the domovoi is watching over you. You're still shivering when the news reaches your sleepy ears: King Athelstan is dead. The entire kingdom is in shock, though no one dares to show it too openly. You'd think, given how much this guy expanded the realm, subdued the Scots, Danes, and Welsh, and basically invented what we call England, that he might get a little more than a couple of prayers and a boiled turnip in his honor. But that's just life in 936, messy, brief, and not particularly sentimental. Ethelstan's death throws everything into a slow, cold chaos. No one's quite sure what happens next. His younger half-brother, Edmund, is supposed to take the throne. But he's only 18. You wonder how that will go. Teenagers barely make it through puberty in your time, let alone rule entire kingdoms. Still, he's the legitimate heir, so all of Mercia and Wessex pretend to be excited. There's muttering in the fields, though, and a few ox carters you overhear are definitely hoping someone else swoops in, maybe the Vikings. Maybe even the devil himself. Speaking of the devil, let's talk about religion. Because everything, politics, society, your food, your neighbors, the shape of your shoes, is tangled up with the church. After Ethelstan's death, the clergy gets busy praying, chanting, and probably shuffling around nervously in cloisters, unsure if the next ruler will be as pious. Athelstan was no joke when it came to God. He donated relics, funded abbeys, and collected the bones of saints like some people collect coffee mugs. You can practically still hear the echo of Gregorian chant vibrating through the cracked stone of every chapel wall. You visit a small wooden church nearby. It smells like smoke and incense. The priest there, a stooped man with teeth like broken shells, is more or less leading the village now that the king is gone. You watch him console a weeping old woman whose son was crushed by an ox cart, then turn around and berate a boy for whistling on the Sabbath. Religion is the glue, yes, but sometimes it's more like a rusty nail. Ethelstan's funeral is a bizarre mix of humble and holy. You aren't there, of course, you're just some peasant from the wrong side of the turnip patch, but the gossip trickles in, monks carrying relics through muddy roads, mourners dressed in wool, the king laid to rest at Malmesbury Abbey beside his favorite saints. Not his ancestors, though. That's the strange bit. Historians still argue whether it was a sign of humility, personal devotion, or maybe a last rebellious gesture against his royal bloodline. Either way, it's not what kings usually do. And then there's the economy. Because while the nobles are bickering and bishops are fasting, real folks like you are left wondering what this leadership change means for the grain tax, the silver coins, and the price of dried eel. You see, Athelstan had a surprisingly sophisticated economy, at least, for 10th century standards. He standardized weights and measures. That sounds boring, but when your dinner depends on whether a pound of flour actually weighs a pound, you're thankful. Under Edmund, no one's quite sure if these reforms will stick. Coins bearing Ethelstan's stern profile are still circulating, but rumors say the new mintings will be lighter. You palm one of the old ones. It's cool and bright in the morning sun, and it feels like holding on to the last crumb of a stable world. You wander back to your village, past frostbitten hedges and muddy paths. A local lord has already sent out messengers demanding renewed fealty. You gather with others in the central clearing, swearing your allegiance to someone you've never met and will never see. It feels hollow. But no one protests. Not after what happened to that guy in the next village who refused to pledge. He's now known, half-jokingly, as Hollow Hugh. That evening, you sit by a fire with a few others. The talk turns, inevitably, to Athelstan. Was he good? Was he just lucky? Did his prayers actually hold off the apocalypse for a while, or was he just better at pretending he had control? A wiry shepherd mutters that Athelstan once touched his shoulder during a pilgrimage, and he hasn't had a stomachache since. Another says the king once had a dragon's scale buried in his crown. You roll your eyes, but the stories are comforting. The most bizarre thing you overhear. A rumor that Athelstan never died at all, that he vanished into the west with a sword made of moonlight and will return when England needs him most. You're not sure if that's inspiring or terrifying. Or both. But the world doesn't pause for legends. Edmund is king now, and life grinds forward. The roads stay muddy. The wolves still howl. You still wake up with a crick in your neck and a mild dread about the next tax collector. But something's shifted. You can't quite explain it. It's like the fog hangs a little heavier. Like the songs at church are a little quieter. Athelstan, for all his faults, held the kingdom together. And now, well, now you'll see. For now, you huddle deeper into your cloak. A cold wind is rising. And somewhere far off, bells ring. Not in celebration, but in mourning. The days following Ethelstan's funeral bleed into one another like rain on old parchment. The village adjusts slowly, cautiously. The rhythms of peasant life haven't changed, of course. Sunrise still means work, the Lord's Day still means no whistling, and the only predictable thing is that nothing good ever comes from a man on a horse carrying a scroll. And yet, you feel it, the kingdom is holding its breath. Edmund, now King Edmund I, begins his reign with all the hesitant swagger of a teenager in an oversized crown. You hear of him in whispers, how he's handsome, quick-tempered, and determined to prove he's not just Ethelstan's little brother. Whether this is a good thing is up for debate. Around the village fire, theories blossom like mold on old cheese. One man insists Edmund is building a secret army to march on the Danelaw. Another claims the new king has taken a Viking concubine with flaming red hair and a tongue sharper than a scythe. You know better than to believe it all, but still, you listen. After all, you've got nothing else to do while repairing your boots for the third time this week. And then, things begin to change. The first thing you notice is the priest. He's jumpier than usual. During Mass, he flubs the Latin and forgets to consecrate the wine, twice. A few days later, he announces a royal order: all villagers are to attend a special sermon and reaffirm their loyalty to the new king. You stand in the mud with your neighbors as the priest drones through the same words you've heard your entire life, only now they're directed at a new sovereign. It feels the same, yet different, like putting on your dead father's cloak. Familiar. But heavy. Shortly afterward, two royal reeves arrive, grim-faced men with swords at their hips and little patience for small talk. They're here to conduct a land survey and update the tax rolls. You and your neighbors grumble as they measure fields with knotted ropes and argue over who owns which cow. One of them marks your name on a parchment with a bit too much enthusiasm. You try not to take it personally. Then come the proclamations: Edmund is raising funds for a new round of fortress repairs. He claims it's to protect against Norse incursions. Some folks say it's really just a way to keep the lords in check. Either way, it means higher taxes. You sigh, gut another eel, and wonder if it's possible to survive on boiled nettles. Amid all this bureaucratic reshuffling, there's something oddly comforting in the monotony of peasant life. You wake, you toil, you eat when you can. There's a kind of peace in it, like a bad song you've heard so many times it becomes part of your soul. You patch roofs. You mend nets. You try not to sneeze when the wind carries the scent of the tannery your way. But beneath the routine, a restlessness is brewing. One morning, a group of traveling monks passes through. They speak of unrest in the north, raids, feuds, whispers of rebellion. The Danes are watching, one murmurs as he blesses your child. They always are. You nod politely, but later that night, you wonder if he was right. Was Athelstan the only thing holding the patchwork kingdom together? Even the weather seems unsure of itself. The rains come earlier. The sun sets faster. Your crops sprout oddly, thin in one row, thick in the next. Superstition creeps into every corner. Someone says it's a sign from God. Another swears the spirits of the old kings walk the forests at night. A widow 2 huts down hangs garlic from her lintel. You do the same, not because you believe in ghosts, but because it's better to be safe than strangled by a phantom king. And then, one day, everything goes still. A royal herald arrives on a sweating horse, face pale, voice hoarse. He bears news: a border village to the west was attacked, burned to the ground. Survivors claim the assailants spoke in guttural tongues, wielded axes, and laughed as they torched granaries. You don't need a scholar to translate, Vikings. Suddenly, the new taxes make sense. Suddenly, Edmund's youth isn't a curiosity, it's a liability. And suddenly, the kingdom feels less like a mighty realm and more like a rotting shield held together with twine and prayers. You wonder what the future holds. Will Edmund rise to the challenge? Will the nobles rally behind him, or use the chaos to grab more land, more titles, more blood? For now, you return to your chores. Your sheep don't care about kings. The chickens need feeding. And your boots, still, need fixing. But that night, as you lie on your straw-stuffed mat and stare at the smoke-blackened ceiling, a single thought takes root. Athelstan is gone. And the world is unraveling. Winter arrives not with a whisper, but a slap. The winds howl down from the hills like a vengeful choir, stripping the trees bare and slamming against your hut until the walls groan like old bones. Your breath clouds the air indoors. The hearth, once a place of comfort, becomes a battlefield against the cold. You learn how long a log can last. You learn how many turnips a man can eat before he starts dreaming about them. With the frost comes a slower pace, less work in the fields, more sitting around the fire, listening to the elders' stories for the 100th time. Some of the tales are about the old days, when Mercia stood proud, when Alfred fought back the Northmen, when Christ himself supposedly smiled on Wessex. But increasingly, you hear tales of fear. Of villages disappearing overnight. Of black sails on the horizon. Of strange omens, deer born with 2 heads, stars falling from the sky, monks struck dumb in mid-prayer. Still, nothing quite prepares the village for what happens next. It's mid-morning, and you're splitting kindling when the horn sounds. Not the usual kind, the dull cow horn the reeve uses to summon you to labor, but the high, sharp, panicked kind. You drop the hatchet and run to the edge of the village with everyone else. What you see stops your heart. A boy, barefoot, bloodied, barely able to speak, is clinging to a farmer's cart. He collapsed just past the old stone cross at the crossroads. You help drag him toward the fire. He reeks of smoke and salt. When he finally talks, his voice is cracked like old parchment. The coast, they came from the sea, burned everything. The village falls silent. He speaks of longships, of fire, of steel. Of men with braided beards and dead eyes, who laughed as they killed. He says they landed near Exeter, but they're moving inland. You do the math in your head. If they don't stop, if no one stops them, they'll be here in days. Panic spreads fast. Some families speak of fleeing to the woods. Others want to hide in a nearby monastery. A few talk of digging ditches or forming a militia, though the only swords in town are rusty, ceremonial, or part of a plowshare. The reeve sends word to the nearest stronghold, but no one expects a reply soon. You've lived long enough to know how slow kings move, and how fast raiders do. The priest tries to keep order. He organizes daily prayers. He talks about divine protection and holy fire. You want to believe him, but the child's story clings to your mind like burrs in wool. 2 nights later, the church bell rings wildly in the dark. You leap up, grabbing a torch, heart pounding. Outside, the villagers are gathering. There's no fire on the horizon. No sounds of war horns. Just a rider, alone, slumped over his horse. He falls before anyone can catch him. His body is mangled. The cloth on his arm bears the sigil of King Edmund. The message is clear. Help is not coming. What follows is 3 days of madness. People dig trenches in frozen ground with shovels and bare hands. You help erect crude barriers from carts, thatch, and barrels. Children carry stones to hurl from rooftops. The blacksmith, normally drunk by noon, sobers up and begins hammering anything sharp into something sharper. Even the priest trades his rosary for a cudgel. You've never seen the village like this. Desperation brings out strange things in people. Bravery. Cowardice. A kind of madness that burns hotter than fear. And on the 4th morning, they arrive. It's not an army. Just a dozen or so of them. But they're the size of trees and look like they were carved out of bad dreams, leather and iron, axes and blades, smeared in red. They don't shout. They grin. Your village fights. It is a terrible, clumsy, chaotic thing, nothing like the songs. There's screaming, and smoke, and the terrible sound of steel meeting bone. You swing a farming hook. You miss. Then again. Then you hit something. You don't know if it was a man or a log. You just keep swinging. And then, it's over. The raiders leave as quickly as they came, taking what they can carry and setting fire to 2 homes. One of them is the midwife's. She stands silently in the ash, holding her husband's charred belt. You're alive. Many aren't. When the fires are finally put out, the village sits in silence. You can't remember the last time it was this quiet. Even the chickens have stopped squawking. You think of Athelstan. Of Edmund. Of all the noble men in polished halls who make grand speeches about defending the realm. You think about how far away they feel right now. How small the kingdom seems when your corner of it is burning. And yet, something stirs. The village survived. You survived. Maybe that's the real strength of England, not in crowns or castles, but in the mud and blood of ordinary people who refuse to fall. The next morning, you help repair a roof. Life continues. Spring creeps back like a guilty lover, too ashamed to show its face after such a brutal winter. The snow melts in dirty heaps, leaving behind mud and rot and the bones of things you'd rather not name. But the sun returns, cautious and pale at first, and then with bolder steps. Crocuses crack open the soil like tiny fists. Lambs wobble about the pastures. Birds return, and so do flies. And, as always, the work begins again. You are older now, not by years, but by memory. You survived a winter that was more war than season. You survived fire, hunger, and men who kill for sport. But survival doesn't earn you rest. The thatch needs fixing. The tools need mending. The fields demand your spine, your sweat, your silence. Yet there's something different in the village. The reeve, once a man of orders and fines, now shares his bread more readily. The blacksmith, who once scowled at children, now carves little wooden animals in the evenings and leaves them by the door of those who've lost someone. The priest no longer preaches of sin and damnation, but of endurance. Of rising after the storm. Even the air feels changed, less like breath and more like promise. One day, a rider arrives again, but this time bearing parchment rather than wounds. It's a decree from the king. He thanks your village for its resistance. Offers prayers for the fallen. Promises protection, though everyone silently agrees that means little. More importantly, he offers land. Not much. Just a few strips of abandoned territory farther north. But land is land, and in this world, it's freedom. For those brave, or foolish, enough to settle it. You are one of them. You pack what little you have. A satchel. A knife. A coil of rope. A sack of seed saved from last harvest. The midwife gives you a blanket. The blacksmith hands you a crude axe. You nod thanks. No one says goodbye. Not out of coldness, but because there are no words. Just nods. Just the quiet understanding that you carry not only your own hopes, but theirs too. The journey is long. Days of mud, forests, and river crossings. At night, you sleep beneath the stars and remember all the nights you spent staring at the rafters of your old hut, wondering if tomorrow would come. Now, tomorrow stretches endlessly before you, wild, green, unknown. When you finally reach the clearing, a high knoll above a bend in the river, you stop. It's nothing. Just grass, wind, a scattering of trees. But to you, it's everything. You mark a spot with stones. You dig the first post hole. You whisper a prayer, not to saints or kings, but to the dirt itself. May it hold. May it give. May it remember you. Years pass. The seasons will on like a grindstone, shaping you further. The hut becomes a house. The garden grows. A few more families arrive, some you knew, others strangers. Together you raise walls, dig wells, chase off wolves. You learn to build more than you break. Children are born who never knew the raids. They play in the stream and mock your stories. You let them. That's the point, isn't it? One day, as you sit on a bench carved by your own hands, you watch the village move about you. There's laughter. There's baking bread. There's singing, bad singing, but joyous. And you realize something. You were never meant to be a hero. You weren't forged in legend. No one will write songs about the time you held a fence against men with axes, or how you spent 7 days carving beams from a fallen oak. But here you are. Alive. Rooted. A quiet, stubborn miracle in a world that tries very hard to erase such things. You close your eyes. The wind brushes your face like an old friend. And for the first time in a very long time, you let yourself rest.